This is Ray Varner in Franklin, Virginia on July 21st, 2011 at the home of Diane Hall. She'll be the interviewee today with the Oral History Living Legacies Oral History Program and the Women of Randolph-Macon Oral History Program. Also in the room is Sarah Hendricks and Claire Stevens, both from the Development Office. All right. Hello, Diane.
Hello, how are you?
Good. So the first question is pretty easy. So where did you grow up and where did you go to high school?
I grew up here in Franklin. I went to Franklin High School, graduated in 1978. Went on to Randolph-Macon.
So how did you first hear about the college?
There are many prominent men in this town who are now deceased, but they went to Randolph-Macon. So many of the kids I went to school with, dads, attended Randolph-Macon. So I heard about the college. And one of the gentlemen recommended that I go up and see the school because he had heard that it went co-ed, and he thought I should take a look. He knew that I wanted to go to school close by and go to a small college. So he recommended that I go up there.
Was that person an alum?
Yes, he was.
Do you remember who it was?
I was trying to remember his first name last night. It was Mr. Moyler. He was a lawyer in town. He's now deceased. So he graduated, I believe, in the, I want to say late 40s, early 50s. So been a
Do you
while.
remember any of the other alums who were in the area?
No, I don't. But I could get that information for you. It was just the college was talked about here in town, and at that time, I was being recruited pretty heavily by larger schools, and I wasn't interested in going to Virginia Tech back then, which was a much different school back then, and schools that were larger. So, yeah, Randolph-Macon, I went up there very early in my senior year of high school.
Can you tell us about that trip that you took to campus?
I can. I think one of the best things about that trip was the fellow who showed my parents and I around was a Phi Delt. He was a sophomore, and he was just one of the nicest fellows. And unfortunately, my yearbooks are at my mother's house, or I would have looked up his name last night. But he was so nice and just so energetic, and he really sold me on the school. But then I met with a gentleman, Chaplain Gibson was there, Ira Andrews was there, Dean Hall, I can't remember her first name. Yeah, she was there, met with her, and it was just a really positive experience.
Do you remember any of your impressions on just the campus aesthetically?
I do. The first thing I remembered, or when I was thinking about this last night, was the fountain. That was always, the campus was very small then, so as soon as you drove down, was it England Street, you saw the fountain and in front of Mary Branch. So that was the first thing I just loved, and but it was quaint. That's what I was looking for. So much different campus now.
So you mentioned that people told you that the college had just gone co-ed, but did you take that into consideration when you made your decision to go to Randolph-Macon, that it had just gone co-ed?
No. No, I had heard that it was just a really good school, and I had checked into it. I'd made a couple phone calls, and the people I spoke to directly just on the phone were just so warm and inviting. It was like, just come up anytime, come up, take a look. But no, that wasn't a consideration. And that at that time, it wasn't really pushed or publicized. When I got there in 1978, or when I visited the college in 1977, that wasn't really a push. You didn't really hear about how it had just gone co-ed.
Do you remember arriving on campus as a freshman? So the first move in?
I do. I lived in Mary Branch Middle, and at the time there were what we called the new dorm, which I think is Conrad. It had just been built, and we didn't want to be in the new building. I really wanted to live in Mary Branch, and I don't know if I had a choice about that, or I can't remember. But we all moved in. There were many freshmen. I think there were 14 girls on my hall, maybe, and more than half of us were freshmen. So we all moved in the same day. I already had written letters to my roommate all summer, actually, so we knew a great deal about each other, and I was very lucky. I had a wonderful roommate. I lucked out. But it was wonderful. We just pulled in. We couldn't wait for our parents to go. They wanted to hover around, and we were like, no, you can go, leave us now. And it was great. It was, having that many girls on one hall. We shared the bathroom. I think there was 2 shower stalls and 14 girls, and we had to work out our schedules, who got showers when, and I'm sure I guess they're still doing that in Mary Branch. I don't know, but yeah, it was fun. We had a good time, and I guess we had about a week before classes started, maybe, and being females just arriving, you got a little bit of attention from some other students on campus, so that was sort of fun too. But yeah, it was a good time. We were excited, and many of us knew we were going to go to Randolph-Macon for almost a year, so we were building up to that moment. It was fun. We were all excited.
Can you tell me what the food was like when you were at Randolph-Macon?
The food?
So, yeah, where you ate or what it was like?
Sure. The dining hall hadn't been built yet, so we were in a little building. I think it might have been even cinder block building, close to where I guess the gym still may be.
That building is now the weight room.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So it's still on campus.
Yeah, and they didn't open the doors until, if you ate lunch at 11 o'clock, they opened the doors so that students were sort of lined up outside. Didn't matter what the weather was. We all had to wait outside, and then we would snake through this line. And the big thing that we were always so excited about was that they had an ice cream chest of all this ice cream. But food, it's funny. I started working in the dining hall soon after I got to Randolph-Macon, and I worked for the food service for all 4 years I was there. So I saw it as an opportunity, as a job. So yeah, I don't really, it was food. We weren't that. It wasn't that big a deal back then. I work for a food service company now, and I've fed college students, and it is such a huge part of their admissions to a college now. Where can I eat? What options do I have? None of us thought that way back then. It just wasn't a part of. It didn't matter. I don't think I would have not gone to Randolph-Macon because I didn't have a courtyard full of food choices. So it was just different then. Such an emphasis on it now.
Was it run by the college, or did they have an outside vendor?
It was an outside company. Saga was the name of the company. And I am still employed by the companies that have since purchased Saga. So I've been working for this food service company for 33 years.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so it's funny how that turned into
Who owns it now? What's the name of the company now?
Sodexo.
Okay, sure.
It's a French company, and I worked for Marriott, owned it for a while. Actually, Marriott purchased Saga in the 90s, and then Sodexo purchased this section of Marriott. So that dining hall experience became my career.
So, what things in particular did you do while you were working with the dining hall? What were your duties?
My first job was washing pots.
So when you become CEO, you can really say, I started. Yeah. Like sweeping them forward.
Yeah, I washed pots, but I had to put myself through college. I paid in my own way. And back then, financial aid to students was so available to us that it was great. I could go to Randolph-Macon and get aid. they were wonderful to me, but I did have to buy books, and so I had to work for all of that. And you all don't remember this, but in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a gas crisis, and the economy was bad. And if my parents had borrowed money, it was going to have to be like 19% to put me through school. So it was much easier for me to apply for my own loans. And of course, they helped me and supported me in many other ways. But but I saw an opportunity that if I became a student manager of the cafeteria, I could make $6 an hour as opposed, or I think it started at $4 an hour as opposed to $1.20 maybe an hour. So I went for the big bucks.
Yeah.
And I became a student manager my freshman year. So it was just a good place to work. And a lot of us did that. I'm sure more than half of my friends worked, either in the library, what was it called? Work-study program, is that what it's called? Yeah, so.
What did you do as a manager? What does that entail with the?
Just opening and closing the cafeteria. Catering was the big part. I was actually a student manager for the catering. And when I got to Randolph-Macon, Mr. White, Luther White, I believe, was the president of the college. And the next year, Dr. and Mrs. Payne took over as president. And they were wonderful people. I just loved working for them, but they did a lot of entertaining. And I became the head student for the catering that they did at their house. If they had confidential meetings, I would wait on them. It was wonderful. They were just so good to me. So I was the catering manager. And luckily, I had the manager didn't mind me taking that responsibility at all. So it was a wonderful learning experience. Every speaker that came to Randolph-Macon, any guest, people who came in, fundraising events, I was at all those events. Now, I was working. I wasn't being waited on. I was doing the waiting, but I could hear the presentations. I met the authors. It was great. I loved it. So it was a good experience for me. The Paynes are just wonderful people.
Can you tell us more about your social life while you were on campus? So, which other activities that you might have participated in, or?
Well, socially, we spent a lot of time at the fraternities, which was fun. We spent a lot of time at the soccer games, baseball games. I had never seen a lacrosse game before I got to Randolph-Macon, so that completely interests me, because down here in Franklin we don't play lacrosse. And so we spent a lot of time doing those things. But I guess the main social structure was around fraternities, what they were doing, and going to the football games. I wasn't in clubs. I spent time in class studying and working, basically, and then having a little bit of fun in between.
So were you a little sister of any of the fraternities?
I was. I started dating a Kappa Alpha, KA fellow, it was about February of my freshman year. And, I was a KA little sister.
So did you have an official becoming a little sister? Did there have a meeting or something? Or
Yeah, I don't really remember how that all worked. I remember in the future we had to blackball girls where they were going to become a little sister or not, and it got really I didn't enjoy it as much toward my junior and senior year, I can put it that way. So, but at first it was fun.
Did you keep dating the same guy?
I did till he graduated. Yes, he was 2 years ahead of me.
So was that a requirement to be a little sister, or is that you had to date one of the brothers?
No, I don't think you had to date one. I just think you had to be associated, a friend of. I don't think so. I don't really remember that too well. There weren't many of us. There were only like a handful of us that first year, and I think I was a sophomore when it happened, and I think the other girls were seniors, and I just happened to. You know what it was is that a lot of the fellows at KA played football, and so I was at the catering events, and we fed the football team extra meals and special meals and things like that. And I think they saw me, got to know me, and I got to know them, and I think that was one reason I was younger. But yeah, I don't remember all the details of being a little sister. It wasn't like a sorority that was organized, and we all did things together, and we moved in this group. It was just fun. Old South was a big deal every year. I don't know if they're still doing that at KA. If you were invited to Old South, that was a big event at Randolph-Macon at the time.
Do you remember the Camptown races? Do you remember that?
I do. Yes. I don't know about the races per se, but I know about the party that took place afterwards, and the bands on campus, and it was a fun time. Yeah, I'd forgotten about Camptown.
So can you tell us about who your close friends were? Or obviously you dated this guy, so maybe.
I can tell you who my close girlfriends were.
Yeah.
My roommate was Anne Mariani, who is now Anne Mariani Morgan, and like I was saying earlier, she and I had started writing each other the summer before we got to Randolph-Macon, and we stayed roommates until our senior year when we both moved off campus, and we were really lucky, and we're still really good friends. Jessica Clark and Charlotte Pierce were two other really good friends of mine. Charlotte Pierce Craig, and Jessica Clark, and the four of us were real good friends, and everyone on our hall, we were just really close, but we were the four freshmen that were real good friends. That when we first got there, we sort of bonded. But yeah.
Were they little sisters too, or were?
No, they weren't KA little sisters. I think. Oh well, Anne was a Phi Cap little sister. I don't think that's there anymore. That's that for. Is it? Yeah. I think she was a Phi Cap little sister. I don't believe Charlotte and Jess were involved in that.
But I mean, you were still really close friends, even though you were different organizations or not even in the same.
See, it wasn't it didn't seem like that back then. It wasn't like an organization. It was sort of more of just something we did once in a while. It wasn't like a sorority. It wasn't an organized thing. It was more like, if there was a party there, you went and helped set up something before it started.
So, were they also your roommates all the way throughout?
Anne was my roommate, yeah. Charlotte and Jess lived across the hall the entire time. But I moved off campus my senior year, and Anne did also. We lived in the apartments across Route 1 over there our senior years. It was cheaper for me to live off campus my senior year because I could eat for free in the cafeteria, and costs of Randolph-Macon were starting to go up my senior year, and so it was just more economically feasible, and it was just smarter for me to move off campus.
Did you enjoy it more being off campus, or would you rather have been on campus? Or?
I wish I'd stayed on campus, yeah. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. But yeah, looking back, I wish I'd stayed on campus. Yes, I missed experiences that I think I would have enjoyed. Plus, very few of us had cars, and I think our freshman year back then we weren't allowed to have cars. So, and I didn't have a car while I was in college, so I had to walk to work and to back and forth, and I was going back and forth a lot. Because I would go and do a breakfast, a catered event, go back, change my clothes, go to class. I always had morning classes. I always wanted morning classes, and then I'd go back and change my clothes and go back and do functions at night. So I was constantly walking back and forth. So it was a little inconvenient too.
Yeah. Do you remember if there were any visitation policies or curfews while you were around for the dorms?
Well, we had a house mother in Mary Branch, Mrs. Shackelford, and but she didn't put any restrictions on us. No, but we did have a house mother. I believe the dorms were locked. We were supposed to have a curfew. I had friends who lived down in the basement. They came in my sophomore year, and they got very tired of girls knocking on their windows to let us in. The doors locked. We didn't have any kind of card or anything at that time that I can remember. We were just supposed to be inside. But no, there were no curfews that I can think of. That I had to work a lot, so I wasn't out. We weren't just out all the time, especially during the week. In the weekends, we'd go out and do things. But yeah, there was a lot of freedom, and I think that was the downfall of many of the students back then. There was so much freedom, and I think it was a culture shock for them a little bit. But it was good for me. I liked the independence.
So switching more to academics now, what was your major while you were at Randolph-Macon?
Political science.
Science. Did you come in thinking you would be a political science major? Or?
No, I got there as a chemistry major, and I placed out of a couple chemistry classes, and I did very poorly. The first few weeks I was at Randolph-Macon in the chemistry class that I was in. I think it was inorganic chemistry, but I can't remember. And my advisor was Howard Davis, who was a political science professor. And I went to talk to him because I had never gotten anything below. I practically got through high school with all A's. So to get a D on an exam, just starting out in college, was devastating for me. So I went and talked to Dr. Davis, and I stopped chemistry, and I went into intro to poli-sci 3 weeks into my freshman year. They let me change, and he was just such a great professor that I became fascinated. I've always been a history buff, so I was taking history classes already, so political science was very close to that. So I guess the college made an exception to the rule for me, but it was great. It worked out wonderfully. So, but I was devastated when I got a D on an exam right after just getting to college. So Dr. Davis took pity on me. He was a wonderful man.
So, did you make the decision then that you were going into political science, or did it come a little bit later, or you just knew after that?
At probably my freshman year, I was either going to be a political science major or history major. I think what did it for me were the professors. Dr. Davis and Dr. Unger were the two political science professors, and Dr. Kuntz, but I didn't have him as a professor my freshman year. They were just so great, and I did well, which was encouraging for me at that point. I got to college and I started having difficulty, and it was shocking to me because I'd always gotten straight A's. Freshman English, first semester I got a C, and I think I had a hard time adapting to the academics, even though I'd taken college level courses in high school. Something had just changed, so toward the end of my freshman year I knew political science. I was really interested in it.
I guess you did better in that intro class, I guess.
Oh, I did great. Yeah. That was wonderful. It kicked right in. So I was fascinated by it, actually.
Who did you have for the English class?
Dr. Wooten. he was tough for me.
Yeah.
So he was also good. That's one thing, I always took 8:30 classes because I had to work around my work schedule. And sometimes there'd be like 5 or 6 of us in these classes. So you got some individual attention that sometimes you didn't really want. So a lot of it was, verbal, back and forth, asking questions, talking. You weren't lost in a big hall of students, so you could sit back there and hide. So I had to get used to that. I took German. Dr. Noe, that was difficult for me too. I had taken 5 years of French. Probably could have placed out, but silly me thought, oh no, I'll go to college and do something new. Yeah, that didn't work out well either.
So, are there, other than their political science professors, and maybe, or maybe there is some of their stuff, but are there any classes or particular professors that stand out to you above the rest, or for some different reasons?
Yeah, Dr. Reinhardt was a history professor, and he was a great teacher, I thought. I took English or British Empire, French history, Russian history. He was the one who got Robert Massey, who's an author, to come to the college. He wrote Nicholas and Alexandra back in the 70s. But Dr. Reinhardt was a history professor. Howard Davis, like I've mentioned many times, he was my advisor all 4 years, and I probably took more Howard Davis classes than any other professor while I was there. I think Dr. Reinhardt. I avoided math and science, but I took geology and astronomy. Schuyler Miller, Dr. Miller? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was old school. I mean, when I got there, he was older. So but I sort of avoided math classes. And after chemistry, I didn't want anything to do with science. It had made sense to me in high school, made no sense to me once I got to college.
Makes sense. So can you tell us about, we know that you stayed, or what you did right after graduation, so I guess you stayed with the company somehow, or how does that work?
I did. I actually worked at Randolph-Macon for 3 years after I graduated. So I got there in 1978 and I left in 1985. So one thing I did, I hired students to do catering, especially for the Paynes, Dr. and Mrs. Payne. So I knew many of the other graduating classes and students because I hired them and they worked for me. And so, and this is interesting, the most workers who worked for me doing catering were male students from Kappa Sig, the fraternity next to KA. I guess it's still there. So I had primarily a male staff, but many females too. So I was there 3 years after I graduated. So when I look at the alumni bulletins, I always look up to 1985 because I knew those students also. And some of my friends were behind me, so they were still in school graduating from 83, 84, and 85 also.
Did you continue living in that same apartment area where you had lived as a senior?
No, I moved out to Doswell and lived in a house with a couple people out in the country. And then a couple years after I graduated, I moved down to Richmond, to the Fan area. And many of us who had graduated in 81, 82, 83 lived in that general vicinity. And so we were all connected for many years after we graduated from Randolph-Macon. So that was fun too. A lot of people graduated from Randolph-Macon back then and moved to Richmond. I don't know if they still do that or not. Yeah. So.
When did you move back to Franklin?
12 years ago, to be closer to my mother. She was starting to need more help. So I moved back in 1999. I lived in Richmond. The company moved me around, but I spent the majority of my years probably at VCU. I ran the Student Commons building food service there. And then I moved around, and I came back to Richmond and worked at MCV at the hospital in Richmond as the patient service manager for food service there for 6 or 7 years. So I was in Richmond primarily after I graduated.
So you were kind of the hospital food person, I guess. How does that work? Well, I mean, what does that mean when you're a...
When I was at MCV in Richmond?
Yeah, I just don't know exactly what a food...
It depends. It's like when I was at Randolph-Macon, I was the catering manager. So I went from being the catering student manager to being the catering manager. So I basically worked for Mrs. Payne, and she organized the catering, and I did up the schedules, hired the students. I didn't order the food. I didn't make sure the food was prepared. I didn't do any of that. There were other managers to do that. But I was sort of the face of catering. Other jobs, like by the time I got to MCV, I was the liaison between the clinical dietitians and the food service staff. So I visited patients, made sure they had what they needed, that the food service employees were serving food to the appropriate diet. So I was sort of a liaison. The job I have now here in Franklin is I run the department, the Food and Nutrition Services Department, and I'm a general manager for the company. So what these places do, hospitals and schools hire outside contractors to run their food service, often their housekeeping departments, to come into these establishments or institutions and run the various departments for them so they don't have to worry about it. And that's what I do. I'm a contract worker. So
And you mentioned before we started the interview that you were going to be moving to the Northern Virginia area. Will you stay with Sodexo?
I will. I hope to.
Yeah.
Sodexo has headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and Columbia, Maryland. So I'll be very close to headquarters, and I know a lot of people. I've done this my entire life. Had no intention of doing this for 33 years. I worked, my senior year, I worked at the General Assembly in Richmond. I did an internship for Dr. Davis, and I had a couple opportunities to work as interns without pay when I first got out of Randolph-Macon, and I couldn't afford to do that. And unfortunately, if I had just tried some way to do that, I probably would have taken an entirely different direction. But I got out of school and I needed a job, so I wasn't able to take a job with no pay. So here I am, 30 some odd years later, still feeding people. But it's wonderful because food's a big part of a patient's stay in a hospital. And food has improved. I'm very proud of the food we serve here, and you can really make someone happy by meeting their food service needs. We feed the majority at Franklin or Southampton Memorial are residents in a nursing home, and many of the people who are in the nursing home right now are parents of people I went to high school, junior high school with. So I've known them my entire life. So there's a real connection there. And I know you haven't asked this, but often I'm asked, well, how could you be a political science major, or how can you do this and then end up, being a food service manager? Well, Randolph-Macon taught me how to read. Randolph-Macon taught me how to write. Taught me just the basics. It was just a wonderful education. So back then, at least, you could get out of a liberal arts school and do whatever you wanted. I can't think of one person I went to college with who got there and said, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor. I've gone through 4 years of high school and done all these clubs so I can become this in 4 years. None of us thought that way. And I have to admit that quite a few of the girls just wanted to get married, when they got out of school. That was that time back then. So, it was just a different time. But back to food, that's what I'm still doing. So there are lots of different jobs. To get back to your question around in food service, it depends on how big the accounts are, how many people you're feeding, how many managers you have doing the work for you.
I was just curious of what you actually did, so
Yeah.
that's all I was trying to get to the
Okay.
bottom. But can you? So how have you stayed in contact with the college after you've graduated, other than working there, of course?
I have a lot of friends I keep up with. A year and a half ago, we had a Mary Branch reunion in Fredericksburg at Patty Fuller Toller's house, and that was great fun. You know, we have a friend who lives in Tanzania, East Africa, and she comes back every year, a couple times a year, and visits. So she was able to be there. Just about any girl I knew in Mary Branch was there at that party. It was really neat, and I hadn't seen a lot of them in a long time. I drive through Ashland, going places, and I'll drive through the campus. And I'm shocked by the number of parking spaces and cars that are there, because none of us had cars in the olden days. Yeah, but no, I don't go back. I haven't been to a homecoming. I can't remember the last time. I still give, a little bit of money each year, but I don't have very much contact with the school.
Why do you think that is? Why have you not come back for a homecoming?
Probably because quite a few of my friends don't either. Part of it was that I was there for 7 years and had been there quite a bit and worked a lot. I worked every homecoming, every big event where my friends were having fun participating in these events. I was working. So I think I missed a little bit of that part of it. But I'll have people call me each year before homecoming or Hampton-Sydney and say, well, come on, why don't you just meet us there? And a couple times I set out to do it and just didn't. So I know there was one series a few years ago of, I think I was invited to come back and speak to groups like what you're doing now and how that pertained to what you studied and things like that. And I did respond that, sure, I'd be willing to do that if that occasion arose. But I don't know what happened to that program, or, I never heard anything more about that. So, yeah. Don't go back to Randolph-Macon, but I'm still in touch with a lot of people who went to school there.
It's a funny question, but of course Howard Davis and Bruce Unger died so close to each other. Did you think about coming back for their memorials or anything like that?
Well, I took part in the project of writing letters. I believe Dr. Unger put together a book of letters from students for Dr. Davis's death, but I never really heard anything about memorial services or things like that. I made a couple calls. I actually called Susan. I wasn't able to get through to her. She was busy. She was in a meeting, and I was going to ask her about what was going on, but I didn't take that next step. No. Looking back, I would have loved that, and I should have done that for Dr. Davis. So yeah. I don't know how. I know everything's online now. I work. My job is everything I do is on a computer, and I just don't spend an awful lot of time on a computer once I get home. So I think maybe some people my age and a little older may like the paper things better. And I'm probably speaking out of turn. It might just be for me, but. The more things come in the mail, the better chances I'll read that information. So,
of course, you knew that we were coming today, and I'm sure that you were sort of reflecting on your experiences at Randolph-Macon. Is there anything in particular that we haven't touched on that were sort of big moments of yours while you were at the college? Things that we haven't specifically asked that you'd like to share?
I was thinking about this last night, and I think and I don't know what it is. We were talking about it before the interview started. It's like a big club, and I know of so many people attending Randolph-Macon changed their lives for the better, regardless if you feed people in a hospital or, a fellow I graduated with is head of radiology, or he's a doctor in Richmond, and hugely successful. But I think we all have that same feeling that changed our lives, made us better people. We got an excellent education. It was just a wonderful time, and some of the happiest years of my life were spent at Randolph-Macon, and it's hard to put into words. But once you go and you spend that time there, you're just different. You're better. It's just a great place. It's a wonderful school. And for many years after I graduated, and as kids who I either babysat for or, came up behind me, I would always, oh, you've got to go here, you've got to go there, you got to go to Randolph-Macon. And so it's just a great school. I'm very honored that y'all asked me to do this. So it's, when I got to school in 1978, it was great odds. It was like, I don't know what it was, but there were many more boys than girls, so, we loved that. So that was fun too. But, looking back at experiences, my best friends are still, girls I went to college with. And I was engaged a couple weeks ago, and the first two people I talked to, other than my family, were girls I'd gone to Randolph-Macon with. So, it's we're still a close bunch.
You mentioned looking back. Looking back, is there particular advice that you would give based on your own experience to incoming freshmen now? I mean, to kids who are about to start that experience, is there, advice you would give them, or the things that that you think that they should know before they embark on that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know how Randolph-Macon is now, but like I was saying earlier, you have a huge amount of independence there, and I'm assuming that they still do. And you just have to be really careful how you manage your time. When I got to school in 1978, 18 was a legal drinking age. So it was, people could do whatever they wanted to do. They could party, but you really have to have some sense about you and keep things in perspective, because students would say, or friends of mine say, oh, you only have to take 4 classes. Well, we were busy doing 4 classes, and we went from college, or the Christmas break, into colloquy, which was in January then, and then all the fraternities did their rush week or so it was more parties. So a lot of people lost sight of class, and I think you really have to be organized and just keep getting back to why you're there, but then still enjoy it, because students who go to school and they don't live on campus, and they're just so intent on what am I going to do when I get out of school, where am I going to get my master's, where am I going to do this, where am I going to do that. I always tell them, just slow down and enjoy it, because you're never going to do this again. You're never going to have this opportunity again. And keep your mind on the studies, but have some fun too, because I did, and it was wonderful. But we won't get into that. So that's my advice. Just have a good time.
All right. Well, that's all the questions that I have. So if there's nothing else that you'd like to say, then I guess we're done. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.